An impromptu going-away party for a college professor becomes a mysterious interrogation when he reveals to his friends and colleagues that he's 14,000 years old. Welcome to another feature presentation of Midnight Double Feature, and on this episode, we'll be covering 2007's The Man from Earth, directed by Richard Shankman. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Midnight Double Feature. Welcome to our coverage of 2007's Man from Earth. As you heard in our intro, the Bert Kreischer to my Tom Segura, Zohaib Ali. How you doing?
Hey, what's happening, baby? Are you ready to record our least downloaded episode ever?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I thought about that. I'm writing notes. I'm like, something had to come in last. But I love this movie. Guys, if this is your first time joining us for some reason, the way we're going to do this is we're going to talk about this movie from top to bottom. We are going to spoil it. We are going to get into it. If you have not seen this movie, which let's be honest, out of all the people that ever were, almost none of them saw this movie. Out of all the people that have ever been, obviously the majority of them have never seen this movie. But this is a very obscure kind of pick, and I've waited a very long time to do this. But if you haven't seen it, it's free on YouTube. There's a sequel that's also free. They're free everywhere. You can watch them, and it's a fantastic movie in my opinion. I love it. But we are going to spoil it. We are going to drop a few F-bombs. There is an E on this motherfucker for a reason. And after you're done listening, if you enjoyed what you heard, stop by, rate, and review us on iTunes, or check out our Patreon. It's going to be patreon.com/Midnight Double Feature. It's called The Green Room. It's $5 a month. You get like 60, 70 episodes as of right now, and it's only going to grow. It's only going to get more. But with that out of the way, Man from Earth. This was my pick. How long have I talked about this fucking movie?
Yeah, quite a bit. You can probably go back through some of our older episodes, and I'm talking like old, like back from 2018.
Right,
and,
single digit possibly.
Right,
like
right. And yeah, you can absolutely pick up Colin talking about this movie and me just being like, yeah, sure, sounds good.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, fuck it. But it's so funny because for years I have talked about this and Monster Squad, and you have talked about Sicario, and I don't know, something else. I kind of lost you after the first one, but and we have never watched any of our favorite movies. We've never actually done it. Like, I've never seen Sicario. Like,
we're just too scared to cover these movies. Like, it's one of those.
Yeah.
Once it's done, it's done.
Well, especially this. I want to be upfront. This is a hard movie to podcast about because it is the antithesis of what our normal kind of format is, of us talking about something from beginning to end. There's usually different scenes and time changes and blah, 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 and outfit changes. But this movie is basically a play.
I agree with that to an extent. Only reason is because we've covered Reservoir Dogs, right? Which is a single location feature film. I've been wanting, The Thing. I've been wanting to see The Thing a little less so, because The Thing takes place it takes place mostly at that station.
It's like dynamite involved.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I've been wanting to cover The Hateful Eight, and like this kind of gives me the green light of like, okay, it's possible. Right.
I 100%, even having not seen Hateful Eight, thought about it, because there are only so many movies like this that work in terms of like Night of the Living Dead, The Thing, Red Eye takes place predominantly on that flight. Like there's a lot of movies that just kind of take that one setting and don't move. And I think that this movie is 100%, and it has been turned into a play like quite a few times. But that single setting really kind of helps it out. But obviously I'm a huge fan of this. I could talk about this for days. But I want to start with you. What did you think of this after finally watching it?
Yeah, so I had to watch this on YouTube, so thank you for that. With sponsored ads, sprinkled in there every.
I had to
5 to 10
start
minutes.
a free trial of Showtime for X.
Oh my god! What? Really? It's streaming here on 2 services for us.
couldn't even rent it. The least I had to pay was $10, so I started a free trial.
Okay.
By the way, if you want to be X is going to be on our bonus.
Right. We need some context here.
Patreon.com/Midnight Double Feature. Bob Vance, Vance Refrigeration.
There you go. But yeah, we are covering X after this, after we jump off here on our bonus feed. So that's just some little context as to why we're talking about X. But yeah, this movie, I liked it. I liked it. I'm liking it a lot more as I think about it. I watched this movie last night. So it's still a little bit fresh. I'd never obviously seen this before. But here's my take on it. I've got two big critical comments on it. I think it's really good. Just from the dude, if this was a major motion picture, this would be nominated for a screenplay Oscar for sure. Like,
yeah,
but
it's very, very good, like very boisterous kind of writing.
It's very deep. It's very, like you said, boisterous, but also very like, thought provoking. And here's my first critical opinion. I think it's wasted as a film. I don't think that this is as effective as a movie as it could be in, like you said, a play. Because I think it's a, you could pull this off in a play. You could pull this off in an audio book. You could pull this off in a very limited sort of like TV, maybe like a 2-episode thing. Yeah, I don't know, but because honestly, man, like outside of screenplay, there's no like technical achievements, and I'm not, I don't go to the movies for technical achievements all the time. Sometimes I just want to be told a good story.
Right.
And man, I got to tell you, some of the acting in this was rough. Like I was just,
it is,
it was brutal. I don't know, like just
it is a $200,000 movie.
Yes,
and they're absolutely for. I think for knowing that, it's like the cracks that shine are like, okay, man, I'm surprised there aren't more, kind of. But it's basically a filmed play.
I'm so blown away that
it is strip it down,
that it is kind of as high as 200. Like, if you can make Paranormal for 15 grand, I'm just like, what the fuck? Where did the money go? You need to do an accounting.
It's going to be it's going to be Tony Todd and John Billingsley, and like those guys were probably William Catt. I mean, Ethan Carey and stuff like that.
Right? Yeah. But I liked it, man. Like we can get into it. This is it kind of hit me a little hard with the religion stuff, because it's very you can say it's anti-religion, you can say it's pro-religion. It depends what sort of stance you take. But is it Edith?
Yeah, Edith.
She's brutal. She's absolutely brutal. But
yeah, I love the actor, but yeah, she's
tough.
That character can get really grating,
right? But I mean, that's
especially for me.
Well, that's only because we don't identify with her, right? Like, I mean, like each of these characters walks away with a different perspective, or like a different sort of like take on this Cro-Magnon man and who he is, and whether they believe him, and whether his insights line up with their beliefs. But I liked it a lot. I think I need to watch it again. But I think the YouTube also took away from it, because it's not the best quality either. And, there was some ads thrown in there, and it was tough. But again, the screenplay is top notch. I think the direction's a little schlocky, like kind of thing. Like, like at the end when you find out, when he finds out that he's potentially his son, like I was like, oh, it seems like we kind of rushed through that a little bit, like,
right? Yeah.
But
I think all that's totally fair. By the way, I think there are definitely the technical moments.
Yeah.
Are like when he grabs him and slams him on the floor.
Right.
It's like, man, that's not great. You know, it feels like a sci-fi, like the sci-fi made for TV movies.
It does, yeah.
But it's like its weight is in, like you said, as if it were a radio drama.
Sure.
It'd be like, yeah, that'd be perfect. No,
definitely. And like I think a lot of that comes down to the direction. Like this director, looked up his resume and he hasn't done much of note. I mean, he did Abraham Lincoln versus Zombies, which is an asylum film. So I don't know, man. But yeah, like I think a lot of its pitfalls come down to the directing and the technical aspects. Maybe that was because they didn't have the money for it or something like that. But the screenplay, you can't put a price on putting pen to paper, right? I mean, like anyone can put pen to paper and shit out gold, and I think that's what's absolutely gone down here, because the story, it's actually quite compelling. Like it feels like a fable. It feels like a story that someone. It feels like something that could happen in, let's say, a fairy tale, right? Like gather around, kids. I'm gonna tell you a story, like and
it's a bit of Princess Bride with like the grandfather at the beginning bringing the book in, but it's like the antithesis of that. We're like, if the grandfather sat there and just told him the story the whole time,
right, inconceivable.
Like, how many people would actually line up to see that? Like,
I think they did kind of like yada yada a little bit through a couple of things though. Like whenever they're trying to like, for example, make him prove it, or like he's just like he's like, if I told you to think about this, would you be able to? It's like, no, I wouldn't be. And I'm just like, fuck, man. Like, okay, all right, fine.
Well, I love the moments where Art's like, you just said a few thousand years. Like you just skipped a few thousand years of your life. He's like, I know you're guessing. And he's like, well, you can't get there from here, Art. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I guess. Yeah. Like you can't, that line of thinking doesn't trail in this. It's like, oh, yeah, I kind of guess. But yes, the movie is asking you to take a mammoth leap.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely. But like, I mean, all science fiction does, right? I mean, you gotta be along for the ride. Also, how? I have a question as to how. How did Art bag that? I mean, come on, man. Like,
yeah, right.
It's that was a rough one for me too. That was my third critical opinion. I was just like, damn. All right.
Yeah, he's like swinging way out of his league.
But I
fucking Bella Thorne over here.
I liked it a lot. I think, yeah, like I said, the direction and the acting just took away from it, and I think that's because it's in a film format which could have been tightened up or even like fixed in like a different kind of like medium. But I liked it a lot. Like it brought up, dude, the whole, as soon as like he starts talking about the religious stuff, I was pretty engrossed in it. Like, I was just like, damn, like that was pretty great, to be honest. Because I like, let me ask you, in my own personal life, I'm kind of at a crossroads. I'm kind of like pushing up against it, and but like it was very, it was very solid.
Well, let me ask you, were you ever bored?
No, I was never bored. I was at the beginning kind of like, what in the name of Tommy Wiseau's The Room is this shit? Because when they're rocking up and like, because the supporting characters, other than maybe Tony Todd, the supporting cast are kind of like rough. Maybe they haven't acted before or something. I don't know. But them all rocking up to his house and like, the interactions just felt really off, and the music was also like a little like, I feel like you got that kind of like from like a royalty free site or some shit, like, it's just like, all right, cool. But it feels like an elongated X-Files episode. And but one of the better ones, one of the ones that actually goes into the theory of humankind. It reminded me actually a lot of this book that, surprise, surprise, I started reading but didn't finish. It's called Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind. It's actually really good. I think it's like one of the bestseller. But like, I guess, aren't all books bestseller? Like it says, every book you see in the bookstore, it's like, the number one bestseller.
Right, of course. Yeah, they're going to say
right.
that.
But it's called Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. And I got to dig it out again and finish it because it was actually pretty incredible. But yeah, that's what this reminded me of. I liked it a lot.
Nice.
Great pick. But why don't you tell me why it's in your top 5 films of all time? Because that is a big, big call to make.
Yeah. Well, because I think there's a difference between your top 5 favorite and just your like definitively, objectively top, like what I think would win in a battle royale.
Two different lists.
You know, yeah. But I you know, part of it is definitely nostalgia. Like I don't have a lot of nostalgia like movies from around that, but I do have.
The fuck is this?
I bought this.
Oh.
This is The Man from Earth on DVD.
Oh, you're the one. You're the one that bought the copy. Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You can see that previewed for $4.99 sticker right there on the front. But I bought this. I think this is the oldest movie that I own. It's like 17, I don't know, like 14, 15 years old. And I bought this like when it came out. And I think maybe my copy of Shaun of the Dead is the only other older physical media that I own. But I remember somehow some friends of mine finding this in high school, and we were kind of like, anti-religious and questioning stuff and, blah, blah, blah. And we would do what these people do. We're fucking dorks. Like we would hang out and say, oh man, what if this happened? Or what if that happened? That's what this whole movie is. And that's why it was so fun to us, because that's what we did. We'd say, oh, what if fucking dragons, what if a zombie apocalypse happened, what would we do? And it's just a fun, like analytical, you're safe, but you're going to treat it seriously at the same time. So it was like perfect kind of movie for us. And I think this is the same thing as kind of like Monster Squad found its way to like basic cable. I know the director was like, Richard Shankman at one point was like pushing for it to be pirated. Like he was like putting it on the Pirate Bay and saying, he's like, I want people to see this movie. Well, or that might be the second one.
The sequel they straight up released on Pirate Bay.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I thought it really kind of shows you. I was like, I kind of love that. Like, I kind of love the fact that it's like, this is through and through a passion project. This is never going to be $1 million, enterprise and stuff. But David Lee Smith, surprisingly, I've never seen him in anything before this, and then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute. He's the guy in Fight Club that Edward Norton like shows his bloody teeth to in the boardroom. Yeah. And I was like, oh, and then I'm watching Zodiac and I'm like, wait, he's the father of the 2 kids that see Paul Stein get murdered. And I was like, what is going on? I was like, why is this guy popping up in Fincher shit all the time? So I guess maybe he's just like a Fincher staple. He might just like having him for certain, bits and pieces.
We'll see if
he'll
be in The Killer later this year. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I there's something about this movie that really just kind of stuck with me because I'd never seen a movie like that before, and it was. The movie just kind of starts off kind of as a bit slow. It's like, oh man, we're really going to sit here and just talk about this stuff the whole time. But it's worded in a way that like they play analytical and then they jump over here and go, how can you be talking about this? And then they go back and they play analytical and then they go back and they say, how can we be talking about, there's a back and forth that I think the balance is done pretty well. And you have some characters come, some characters go, the movers show up, like really, really, really small stuff just to break up just the fact that you're sitting in one room the whole time.
That's never been an issue for me though. I mean, sorry to cut you off. I mean,
no.
Yeah. Look, the budget of a movie or like the scale of a movie has never really been an issue for me. I know a lot of people are like, they can be turned off by movies that are set in one location and things like that. But I think they sometimes generate some of the best conversations. Like
right. I think so too. But I do think there comes a time that like, let's explore. If this is all we have, let's explore everything. Like I love when Will and John go out front and Will smokes his pipe and he talks about like the morality of John living for 14,000 years. And I'm like, that's really cool. Like, or he takes the phone call and he takes it in the back bedroom. And we just, even that little bit of just that little thing would just anything to get us out of that room and let us kind of stretch our legs for a minute, I think works really well. But, I love the concept of it, of a guy who's just, it's not, I'm an immortal. It's not, I have powers. It's not, I can fly. It's, I have managed to stay alive for 140 centuries. Not, oh, I'm unkillable. And if you could put my head in a guillotine, it's not fucking Highlander. It's, no, I'm very vulnerable and I can definitely be killed and just haven't managed to die yet. And I love that kind of aspect of it. It's not a guy who is fighting evil or, who's locked in a government facility. It's just a guy living, and the kind of the kind of thoughts around what that would mean to be that old. It's kind of like Interview with the Vampire.
What's that?
The kid. What is her name? I'm
Kirsten Dunst.
Kristen. Yes, thank you.
I forgot
was a Kristen Stewart. That's why I was fucking up.
Yeah.
I have to, but it's kind of like that. It's like being stuck, in that form of like, is that something you would really want? And there was a time where I was like writing a lot of music, and we were recording a lot, and I would put this movie on in the background and kind of turn it down low and just write music on like a piano and an acoustic bass, and then go and take it and blah blah blah. So I was like, oh, I think it'd be really cool to try it. Like, what if you wrote a song about the man from Earth, like you were like what it really means to be this kind of like older character and stuff. And so it was very nostalgic that there's like, I'd wake up and make coffee and put this movie on and go sit outside, and go and write stuff to it. So there's a lot of nostalgia behind it. And there hasn't been a person I've introduced it to that didn't thoroughly enjoy it. This movie is the definition of grassroots, like it definitely hit the internet and stuff, and the internet was a great, I think this was on like the IMDb's like top 100 sci-fi film for a long time. And that is crazy. That's fucking crazy when you think about it. Like, to be even in the top 1,000, but to be in the top 100 IMDb science fiction films is nuts. Like that's really crazy. And I think that the fact that it hasn't aged well in some spots, there's definitely some rough parts. Like I was watching the commentary, and the guy who plays Harry is John Billingsley, and there's a part where he's like, "Okay, what's your punchline?" Like he says some line, he's like, "Oh God, that was
he's
awful."
Rough.
Like
he's rough.
He's laughing at himself, and I'm like, okay, I can handle that. Like even the people that made it kind of understand, like, okay, this is not it's not a well crafted, like unbelievably shiny stone, but it works. Like it does what it needs to do, and it might be a little rough around the edges, but I can handle that. So yeah, I say, because we're gonna go through this thing not fucking line by line. Like we're gonna take this thing in huge chunks at a time, just because there's so much to break down. And good Lord, like trying to write notes for this was a nightmare, because it's like, what have I gotten myself into? But I watched this movie and I see, Tony Todd and William Katt and Richard Riehle, I think is his name, John Billingsley. And I just think, man, these are some great fucking character actors. And the music that they play, that bum 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 bum, when they're just looking at the trees blowing in the wind, I was like, I love the original music written for this and stuff. I adore this movie, and I think that it definitely needs a remaster, 100%. I think there's a little bit too much of the I knew Van Gogh and I was Jesus and I met Buddha, and it's like, okay, come on, man, like that's a little bit much for even a 14,000 year life. Like I could see if you were like, yeah, I was roommates with the guy who designed the Twin Towers, but okay, like okay, that's cool, but like, yeah, I also was one of the conspirators that killed Lincoln, and okay, come on, dude, some of that stuff in hindsight is a little
shot
bit
JFK.
Yeah, he shot he handed Oswald the bullet. I will say, as a kid, or as a as a teenager watching this, I love the thing at the end that he pulls the rug out and says, no, it's been a story, but it's really not, that he actually is this thing. As an adult, I kind of wish he would have been like, no, it was just a story. Like, oh, dude, like only because it would, like, I was watching it with Lindsay and she was like, if this is a story, I'm going to be really pissed off. And I was like, if it's a story, I would love that though, because it's just this it's a fun little analytical stretch with his friends, but it also puts like their friendships in jeopardy. It's kind of fucked up, but I kind of love it. There's something about that idea of him just going, no, it's just a story, and he really isn't 140,000 years old. Like, oh my God, or 14,000.
Yeah. But I actually really love it. Because you see the group, especially Tony Todd's character, really wanting to believe. He really wanted to believe it, so much so that I think he starts crying, right? Like he was actually in tears.
Oh yeah.
And, so like when he pulls the rug out from under them, and we are kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, but whatever, we're here.
Yeah.
everyone in the group reacts differently. Some people really want to believe. Some people are just like angry at him, and some people are just like, "Look, that was incredibly mean," and that was, I don't know. I really liked the fact that he covers it up as a joke, because there's also going to be some self-preservation on his part, right? I mean, like, how else would he have survived? He can't just go around telling people that he, is a Cro-Magnon 14,000-year-old man, right? I mean, and who are these people to him? Just a blip in history,
Yeah, right. You're a flash in the pan. I gotta say, just because we're at that moment, one of my favorite parts is when Will is like, hey, it's time to come to, I'll save it for the end because it makes me laugh my ass off, and I don't want to ruin it yet. So let's start from the beginning. We're really right away. We're just gonna hit the ground running because we have this party. Our friends show up. Basically, John has decided, hey, I'm leaving this college I've been at for 10 years. He's given up in line to be I think like the chairman of the I don't know, something like he's giving up a lot of shit, like his tenure in line to chair the committee or something like that. And he's just giving it up. And they notice he hasn't aged a day in 10 years. They notice the Van Gogh. They say, why the fuck are you leaving so quickly? It is like right away. There's so much mystery that's going on, but the film does something really interesting right away with Harry, John Billingsley character. He goes, you're building the mystery here. You're building the mystery by being so mysterious about where you're going. You're just going to leave and not tell your friends of the last decade where you're going. And it's like, yeah, that is kind of a lot to take in, like imagine you and I have only been doing that. We've only really known each other 5 years. What if I just stopped talking to you one day? It was just like, yeah, I'm done. And then that was it. And it's like, whoa, dude, what the fuck? Like, what's wrong with you?
Maintain. You gotta maintain some boundaries, man. You gotta separate the professional life and the personal life. These people are so fucking encroaching on his personal life. Get fucked. You have no right to know. You know what? No.
Yeah.
No.
There's something like I don't know, because everybody's got those friends at work, and I feel like out of a whole college, these 7 or 8 people are actually kind of like friends. They actually kind of like each other. But they are definitely like, I love when Tony Todd's like, well, not to pry. And it's like, dude, prying was 10 minutes ago. Like, they really just kind of ask him everything but the kitchen sink. They're like, is it drugs? Like, are you crazy? Like, blah, blah, blah. But the setup right away, I love the fact that they're just like, we don't, it's not going to be glamorous. We got paper plates, taquitos, and chicken wings. And I was like, cool. Like, I like this, it's nothing too fancy. Art and Linda are their names. They arrive as well. And all of our characters, by the way, are going to be Art and Linda, Dan, Harry, Edith, Sandy, and John. And he kind of pushes back against their questions, but he does offer everybody a bottle of Johnny Walker and Johnny Walker Green. I
didn't even know they made those.
Yeah. And they start kind of noticing little things, the rock, the bow and arrow, all these little things that basically, like you said, I would have loved if John had stayed with the rug pull of like, no, this really was just a story, because they are giving him all the ideas. And I'm like, oh, it's right there though. Like, damn it,
man. I gotta tell you, Art and his girlfriend, when they rock up, it's fucking hilarious, because she's just like, so can I get an A for awesome? It's like, bruh, I can't. What?
Yeah.
This is when I was like, we're in the Room territory right now.
Well, I love in the director's commentary, it's Billingsley and Shankman, and they're both they're like, yeah, Art and his pretty obvious midlife crisis that he's got going on.
Yeah, the soul patch and everything, dude. Like,
dude, oh my god, he looks like a Family Guy cutaway character, like, oh, that's worse than men in their 40s who are going through a midlife crisis. And I feel like it would be him.
He's the literal embodiment of hello, how do you do, fellow kids? Like, it's
yeah,
Steve Buscemi.
Hello, fellow kids. But yeah, they're kind of tossing everything around back and forth. Like I said, they have the rock, they have all this stuff, and John says, "What if a man from the upper Paleolithic had survived until the present day?" And this is where our movie, that's the spark that ignites our whole movie. And there's great conversation back and forth. I love they cut to the biologist, Harry, and he's like, well, in strictly science fiction terms, basically if his body was perfect in getting rid of waste, his body would not, falter and he wouldn't die. So yeah, he could duck decay. And it cuts to Edith. She goes, oh, that's a secret everybody would love. But I love it. Cuts to John. He goes, would you really want to do that though? Like, would you really want to imagine how desensitized you would be to all the shit that's just like, what is it? What in your brain, you're 14,000 years old, like what gives you a boner anymore? Like what is it that actually surprises you about anything?
I feel like,
but I think that comes.
I feel like the best science fiction films or like horror films deal with this, and they talk about it here. The origin of the vampire, right? I mean, like this is like a key theme in pretty much every vampire movie is like immortality and like whether you would want to live forever and
who wants to live forever?
Right. And like if it becomes torture essentially, you're watching people live and die and live and die, and this guy watches his child live and die, and it's like how much torture can you go through?
Right. And I don't love it, but in the terms of like, there's not much that John hasn't experienced, and to actually see him experience something in this movie that he never has before of a child dying, it's not like, oh, that's awesome. From a film point of view, it kind of like, man, to never have experienced that is kind of crazy. And to see somebody, in this life, how many times has he turned on the TV? How many times has he, gone to the movies? How many times blah, blah, blah. But to actually see something new happen is insane. And I want to give a hats off to David Lee Smith, because from what I learned from the director's commentary is that he got the script on a Saturday and he was at rehearsal on Monday.
They shot this over 10 days.
Yeah. And just the amount of dialogue and the amount of words, the $10 words he has to say in the anthropological and Cro-Magnon and all these big like words that I don't get because I'm an idiot. But just the speak of the movie is, you kind of do. That's the one thing I think that he has this kind of awe, like kind of a K-Pax kind of thing. He's got this like kind of awe going on that he just seems like he is at all times in control and at peace. And that is the believability of the character for me, is that he does kind of come across as like, he not really surprised by anything, but genuine and actually like sincere in his interactions with people. And I like that a lot. I wish David Lee Smith was a more well-known name. Apparently he has worked a lot. He's been in like A Walk to Remember. He's been in a lot of movies, CSI Miami. Like he's definitely a working actor. But they talked about John's hypothetical caveman. He would have learned as a race would have learned if he had an inquiring mind. His mind would, his knowledge would actually be astonishing. What did you think about this the first time they dropped this in and they really kind of got into like the speak of like the movie?
Well, I was familiar with the premise of it, so this wasn't that really surprising to me. Them trying to sort of like justify scientifically how a Cro-Magnon person could survive. It was fascinating. And this wasn't the part of the movie that really riveted me. I mean, like I was just like, okay, we're kind of like we're doing a little bit of yada-ing here, a little bit, and I was just like, okay, it's fine. Because at this point, I'm still trying to get a grasp on like what everyone's sort of like about. Okay, so you got the anthropologist here, you've got the archaeologist here, whatever, and I'm just like, okay. I think this deserves a second watch because I need to figure out what each character is sort of like going for and what they represent. Because the religious character is the one that's the most obvious to me, and I'm just like, ugh, hate you so much. But
yeah. I like that Art is kind of like the counter. Well, not the counterpart. He is like basically it's Harry and Dan that are really like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then there's Edith.
Right, the skeptic, right?
Yeah, they're the ones going, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? By the way, it is thundering outside. So if you guys hear a storm, it's not you, it's me.
There's the skeptic who is not religious, well, not overly religious, but then there's the skeptic who is only discounting what. Sorry, what's our lead character's name again? John. Yeah, Jesus Christ. He says it like 80 times. She's only discounting what John says based on her religious beliefs, right? Like when she's just like, "You are not Jesus." You know, it's interesting to see the skeptic versus the skeptic with faith and how they try and discount or disprove his disprove John's kind of like theories or ideas.
Well, yeah, and I love the fact that they're on. It's kind of like two people that are on the same team for just totally different reasons. That they wind up at the same place, but nothing really happens. But let me see here. Oh, sorry, get my notes pulled up here. Then John drops the bomb. He claims he is, they talked about one century's magic is another century's science. He says, I had a chance to sail with Columbus, but I was afraid he would fall off an edge somewhere. And I think they play moments like that decently as well as they can with what they have. Like the fact that it cuts to everybody and they're like, what the fuck? And just the fact that I think Art does exactly what I would laugh and be like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? And nobody is like, John, what are you talking about? It's like they laugh at him. They're like, what are you talking about? This is stupid. But the movie is asking a lot, and it does kind of stretch, but it's the fact that there are little things that kind of help it get to like stake up to that point where it's like, he's like, pretend it's science fiction. And they're like, are you writing a novel? And he's like, yeah, let's say I am. And it's like, he kind of just gives them enough to keep it going. At some points when it feels like the machine is going to break down, he just puts a little bit of oil and then it just keeps it going again. Enough for me. I think anything less, they're just like, yes, let's break this down with our big giant brains. I don't like that. But the fact that they do have these moments, especially Art, I feel like Art is definitely more akin to who I would be in this situation. If one of my friends, I'd be like, dude, I can't sit here and fucking listen to this. Like, I feel like that would kind of drive me insane to sit there and have to listen to someone say like, yeah, I'm a 14,000-year-old caveman. I'm like, okay, all right. Like that would be very hard for me to sit there in this room for an hour and a half. And I mean, really, they talk for like 4 or 5 hours. To sit there in that room and just take it all in would be like, I don't know if I could. That's a big ass.
Because it is a leap of faith, right? I mean, like he's not providing evidence, right? Like this is, I've talked about this on the podcast before, but like I said, having some, you just whatever, like religion. I'm bumping up against religion, or in my life, I've bumped up against religion, and it's just like for me, I need evidence of things that have happened, like before I can wholeheartedly throw myself into believing in something, whereas a lot of people are just like, oh yes, that was passed down through my family, it's in this book, I believe in it, I'm faithful, let's go. And I just like I can't get on board with that. So yeah, I think I'd also be in Art's position, questioning John's questioning his motives, because like it's like, why are you doing this? Right. Why are you telling us? But also B, like, what do you have to gain? And C, like, where the fuck did you come up with this? Like, this is a weird joke to pull on us,
Right, yeah. And the big thing of like you said, why, which is something that gets brought up a lot that I do really enjoy. The group absorbs what John just told them. He says, pretend it's science fiction. Everyone reacts in their own way. And they ask, what's the punchline? John finally admits that every 10 years, once people notice he doesn't age, he moves on. And again, it's not Art's like, that's good, John. That's very quick. And you can see the cracks in Art start to happen where he's like, okay, not bad. It's the little things where it's palatable to him. Blah blah blah. Then he goes into his early life.
I'll tell you what I really like though. I love that John can't self-identify what he is. Like he's like, I think I'm a Cro-Magnon. Like, like he's not someone who's sure, because these are things that he's learnt about later in life in textbooks, and these are things that he's able to he's experienced them, but he hasn't been able to vocalize them because he's read textbooks, and he's educated himself, and he's able to communicate these concepts and ideas to these people who might be able to understand it better. So like he's not 100% sure. Like, it's the same thing about like how he's able to be like, oh look, I've lived this many years, but I wasn't in every place at every time, and I wasn't learning about things that I wasn't specifically there for in my own point of view. I can only tell you what I learned with my own eyes. I can't tell you. It's just those things of like, I like that he feels very fully formed in terms of like, he can only tell you,
he's not 100%
right.
certain.
He can only tell you
everything.
what he knows, and I love that, actually, because like that sets it apart from quite a lot of other science fiction films where you've got an immortal character who's been through so much shit, and he's just like, I was there for this and this and this, and I experienced this, and it's just like, no, you weren't, dude. You're one person. You're not a hive mind. Like, you know.
I started the Industrial Revolution.
Right, exactly. I really like that he's like, no, I'm one individual and I'm one person, and I experience things very singularly, not how you'd expect me to.
I love that line where he's like, one life, one perspective, from a one window of which to view like a whole world is such a good line. He goes into his early life. He kind of talks about, basically where he stopped aging. Again, I don't want to go over every single little story beat, because his early life is especially like the stuff where I get it. We're setting up our story, but we understand, he aged to probably that age. He stopped aging. That's what happened. And that's basically about the first 15 minutes of this movie.
Caveman, you're going to hit me over the head with a club and drag me into the bedroom? I'm like, bitch, what the
dude.
Okay.
In front of, like, he's obviously in a relationship with Mila Jovovich over here. And,
Resident Evil over here, yeah.
Yeah, she is. I always had a crush on her, the woman that plays Sandy. But the fact that Edith is like, she's thirsty, man. She's fucking thirsty.
She wants the dick. She wants the Lord's dick. that's what she does believe.
Yeah. I do love. I got to look up the actor, but I love Edith. Like, as the performance of her, I'm like, man, it seems supernatural to me. I feel like it's one of the stronger parts of the movie, because she's the kind of wall that all the bullshit, she's the smacking the ball down and going, no, she's the one kind of go, no, that's bullshit, no, that didn't happen. She's the naysayer. I like it.
She's a dime store Lin Shaye, but anyway, so what's okay, I still can't get a read on her or a handle on her. What's Sandy's game? Does she know? Has she known before? Has she suspected?
No, I don't think so at all. Because then they go out to the truck and she's like, do you really think you're a caveman? He's like, do you? And I'm like, you can't motherfucker question with a question over here.
But she's man, I don't know. Like, whenever it cuts to her, she's very intrigued by it, and she doesn't talk a lot in the movie. She's only got like X amount of lines, but that when she says to Edith, I like you less now. Like, that's a very aggressive reaction to this.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like it's, maybe in a certain kind of intuition, because I hate is it women's intuition? I hate that term. But just intuition, as in, that she's obviously very intimate with John and knows him and knows that he's not crazy and that he's not lying. If he's not crazy and he's not lying, she must kind of know something, that John is different. We as the viewer can feel in this room, John is so different from these people. And I think that really helps. He does kind of have this, like, I don't know, weird, like just a very chill, like kind of vibe. It seems like John could get along with everybody. And I think that's the point. I think that we have a 5'10" guy with dark hair who's clean shaven and a good jaw, and his name's John. He wants to fucking blend in. He wants to get along with everybody. Like, I feel like there's a deliberate kind of calmness with him where he doesn't want to seem too high, he doesn't want to seem too low. He just wants to blend right in and go through the middle. And I think that there's something very that comes across to us as the viewers. So I feel like Sandy probably would know this guy's different. There's something else going on with this guy. Because she doesn't seem very surprised when he hits her with it. She's never like, yeah, I think this motherfucker's crazy. She never really kind of like drops it on him. And I don't know if we're here or not, but the fact when she's like, yeah, if it's 10 years, fine. I'll take what, if that's what you can give, I'll take it. And I'm like, she does not put up any resistance to this idea whatsoever, in terms of like, I've been banging a caveman, for the last however long. It seems like they've been in a relationship for a while. That is a bit of a stretch that she seems like, yeah, cool. All right, cool. It's like, I don't buy it. I feel like there'd be a lot more questions. And less with like 140 centuries. That's a lot of women. It's like, oh yeah, that's going to come up eventually. But like, I'd have a few more other questions before that, Do you have any STDs that we got rid of like 4,000 years ago, by the way?
You mentioned in there that you suffered through the bubonic plague. I'm going to need to get you tested again. So.
Right. It's like, just because you might just be asymptomatic, dude. You might have like gonosyppa or something. But basically goes kind of into his early life. Everyone takes a break while John takes a phone call. I like the character moment of him giving the kid the pass, just saying what's history got to do with pre-med. It's like, it's a nice little touch. It's just a moment for us to like John a little bit more.
Oh yeah, that was incredibly effective because I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it paints him as a not a malicious person who would be out there making lies like this. Like he's a trustworthy person.
Right, and it's just a quick little thing. Let me see.
God, I wish I had I had a professor like this at uni, like who was just like, yeah, fuck it, bump him up a grade.
Yeah, cool.
Let's go.
But so John admits that the Van Gogh is real. It's given to him when he was Jacques Born, a pig farmer. He talks about how much the world has changed. Just that, my eye sees Big Macs under the Eiffel Tower, and I'm like, it's just such a good speech to this whole movie.
Jacques Born, the predecessor to Jason Bourne over there.
Yeah, that'd be so funny. The sequel is him like fighting. He can't kill him. I want this guy fucking die, dude. Just like keeps beating the shit out of him. The friends throw questions and John just keeps throwing back answers until they ask him again why. He says, I wanted to do this to say goodbye as myself. And this kind of sets off Art, and Art ends up calling Will, which totally fucking backfires. But the brief parts I want to do when I talk about it, the section are where, she's like, well, geography hasn't changed. You don't know where you're from. He's like, where did you grow up? Could you go back there? Could you figure? He goes, now imagine something from your childhood that you can't remember going to the store, and like how, even for myself, so much has changed. Where the other day I was like, oh yeah, that store Goodies. And they're like, Goodies? I was like, yeah, right there next to. And they're like, dude, it hasn't been Goodies in 15 years. And I was like, oh shit. And like my brain from the town, I don't live in the town I grew up in. It really did make a lot of sense. I love that he's like, imagine trying to remember where you've grown up when now there's probably a building there and geography has changed. I like all the talk.
I do like this. Absolutely. Like everything that he's saying makes absolute sense. But I fundamentally reject her like question of like geography hasn't changed. Where is she coming at that? Like, I mean, I don't understand.
Right.
What's her viewpoint? Because geography has changed in the long and the short term. Like, I mean,
are you talking about major geography,
right? Like Pangea,
the mountain, like the Colorado,
right?
Yeah, like
Gondwana land. Like, I mean, like all that shit. Like
Atlantis,
right? The continents have broken up in the long term, and things are not where they are, like where they are thousands of years ago. But also on a smaller scale, which he just proved to you. So I don't understand where she's coming from. Yeah, I think maybe that was just sort of like a a clunky way.
A general? Like, are we talking about continents? Like,
Right.
are we talking about, like, is he from Africa or Asia? Like, you talking about in a general sense? Because if you're talking about, like, oh, yeah, geography hasn't changed. Yeah, maybe for Africa, you know how fucking hard it is to lock in one spot on that whole goddamn country?
Right.
You know?
Like the tectonic plates, like, smashing into each other, creating mountains. Like, the geography has changed. It's a thing. So, I don't know. I think this is just kind of like the script or the screenplay, just sort of like finding a way to tell us that, like,
She's an idiot.
She's an idiot,
Yeah,
but like, why he can't remember where he's from? Like, like, it's a
right.
It's just I think it was a little clunky because I couldn't get on board with her with that line.
Right.
I was like, what the fuck?
Well, and I think that maybe that's what he is refuting. Is he saying, he can't go back? Of course, it's changed. Like,
he's absolutely refuting
it does
that,
seem
and
like
I absolutely agree with him. It's just I couldn't understand where she was coming from. I was like, what are you talking about?
It seems like a good excuse for us to give us a window in to talk about, all of this. Let me see here. He says he wanted to say goodbye to himself, and this sets off Art, who calls Will. I like when John goes to take the boxes out and Dan has the rock and he goes, wouldn't you have some kind of tool, something from your time? Or he goes, no, really, that rock is from a thrift shop. It was a quarter. And he picks up a pen and he goes, what would you hold on to this for 10 years, 20 years? And he's like, why? As a memento to your beginnings, even if you didn't have the concept of beginnings? And he's like, no, I don't keep trinkets. And I was like, oh my God, I love that part where he's like, why? Yeah. Why would you keep this charging block? Why would you hold on to it? For what reason? So you could prove that you had a charging block in the past? And it's like, yeah, why would I do that? And it's like, it didn't mean anything to me at the time. And I'm like, man, I love the concept of that. The fact that he's like, dude, you're thinking too in terms of like, you see movies about time travelers and, he has a Van Gogh. That was a gift from somebody, like we're not talking about a rock. Yeah. We're talking about a rock. We're talking about a tool. Would you keep a letter opener? It's like, no, why the fuck would I keep that?
I did bump up against this as well. I'm sorry.
Really?
Yeah. And I think this is good because we got to talk about this. So he's never had something of sentimental value ever in the thousands of years that he's been alive, like relationships or I don't know, like in terms of just like, I get it.
Well, no, I think he does because he's got the Van Gogh, but something that old that was just a tool. Right. It's like, why would you keep that? If you don't know if you don't have a concept of time.
I'm not saying like something like a charging block, something that menial, but like you didn't think to get something. I don't know, like I don't know. I can't think of a particular example, but just something special, like.
Sure. Your kid never made you like an arrowhead, it's just something that you would have, but also I would love to see that explored where he's like, yeah, when you live to be my age, you don't keep shit like that because people start asking why the fuck you have it. And it's like, I guess that's
why with this movie, these couple of early sort of like scenes I didn't really connect with. Like first you had that moment with the geography doesn't change. I mean, yes, it does. And then like while I'm trying to catch up with that conversation, this kind of happens, and I was like, oh, wait, hold on, like I don't know if I agree with that, but like the fact that it's asking these questions and it's not telling you that you should agree with it, it's just a concept that it's bringing up, and it's like, let's have this conversation. And this is what the podcast is for, right? So you and I can litigate this, but like, I don't agree with this. I don't think this is something that would happen. I think there would be something that he, because I do understand the concept of travel light in the situation like this, but like you'd have something. I think you'd have something. I mean, like it might be the Van Gogh, but I don't know.
Right. Well, because I agree with that to an extent because I have a rock that somebody gave me on my last day at one of my last jobs, and I've kept it in my car for 5 years. It's just this little rock that somebody gave me, and it is sentimental. Even though I haven't talked to that person in years, I still can't find myself to get rid of it. So I see both sides of it. Agree to disagree.
No, I'm right.
No, no, I know I'm 100% correct.
This is my legal tactics, by the way.
Yeah,
no, I'm right.
You said litigate, and I was like, oh god, here we go.
No. I don't use the word litigate in like my professional life or anything. I actually hear it in a podcast that I listen to quite a bit, and they talk about, let's litigate this, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I like that.
Oh, okay. As John loads boxes, he talks with Sandy about their ill-fated future and what will happen. He says, any children you have, we have, they're going to die, you're going to die, and eventually he'll be gone. He's going to play something I'm surprised we haven't mentioned yet, Benjamin Button. A similar-ish like kind of tale of, not being able to stay because of what you are, because of time, just not affecting you the same.
It's the only Fincher movie I like seen. That.
Oh, it's good. It's a bit of time traveler's life as well, like the Rachel McAdams, Eric Bana kind of thing. I remember that coming out.
Eric Bana.
I love the idea.
I need you to say that again.
Eric Bana. Thank you. I said Bana
from fucking Seinfeld over here.
Yeah.
There's another movie I want to bring your attention to that's very similar to this. Actually, it's called it's a chick flick, but it's actually really good. It's called Age of Adeline.
Oh yeah, Harrison Ford.
Yeah, and, Blake Lively. Yeah, it's actually. I was blown away by it. I wasn't expecting much going to the theater to watch it. I was dating someone at the time, and she's like, "Let's go watch this." And I was like, "All right, fine, whatever." Blown away, absolutely blown away. It's it really reminded me of this actually.
I've read that synopsis before. I love movies like that, or like Frequency with Jim Caviezel and Dennis Quaid. Yep. I love that movie. But the let me see here. Yeah, he talks about what's going to happen. She says, I'll take what I can get, even if it is just 10 years. Dan comes back in. Harry tries to do some kind of grip on him, and he flips him on his ass.
The fuck was that?
And again, it's dude, yeah. I love he just kind of breaks down. He's like, I don't have super hearing. I'm not Superman. I love everything they think he is. He just keeps popping it with a balloon. I do enjoy that he's like, I don't shoot laser beams, man. But my favorite interaction right there is he goes, smooth one here. He goes, sit on it, Dan, and goes and sits down. Like there's moments where even I love the fact that John Billingsley, it's like, yeah, Harry is a dork. And they say in the commentary, the director's like, yeah, Harry's kind of like that funny professor. He goes, he thinks he's funny. Harry thinks he's a funny professor. And I was like, that it's cool that the actor is kind of in on how dorky he is, like, and how much at some points he doesn't work. But I love what he's getting into with Edith. And she goes, if you lived to be John's age, you still wouldn't grow up. He goes, well, maybe when I'm 110, Edith, I'll be as mature as you are. And I'm like, that is so fucking funny, man. Like there are moments of Billingsley's performance that do kind of save this movie for me in the humor, just because he seems like the most natural. He seems very laid back. Blah, blah, blah. Let me see here. Everyone takes a break. I'm sorry. I'm at the wrong spot. When he comes back in, Harry gets laid on his ass. Art starts to lose his patience and kind of lays out John's backstory can be found in any textbook. He straight up says, he's like, you moved to where game was closer to water. You figured out that it was easier to raise animals than to catch them. He's like, come on, this is in any textbook. And I like that there's this parallel between this, the story that John tells about, I met a guy who I suspected was like me, and we told each other the same story, and I couldn't tell if he was being legitimate or if it was just an echo of what I was saying. And they're like, just as you can't be sure that, we can't be sure of you, you couldn't be sure of this other guy. I think there's an interesting parallel there. Let me see here. John talks more of his beginnings, and the tension rises. They ask again, they're like, why are we doing this? We kind of see the divide begin to happen. We have the camp that kind of is for John, and we have the camp that kind of isn't, that are kind of going against him. Let me see here. Will arrives and Dan lays it out. There's no way for either side to disprove or to prove what's going on. It's John has an answer for everything, but there, at the end of the day, there's no way that they can 100% convince him. And I love Tony Todd saying, like, we can sit here and try to bench press logic, and we can try to flex our analytical muscles, or we can just relax. He goes, I can listen to John's story and also not make a decision at the same time. And I was like, I love that. I'm just an observer. I'm not here to like pass judgment and blah, blah, blah. But I think that it's just because Dan really he's like, yeah, I kind of want the story to be true. He is really the guy pushing the wheel with the stick, the whole time. but yeah, that's one of my favorite kind of like, oh, now we're really settled in. Once Will gets here and Dan's kind of like, hey, let's just see where this goes. I like that. I feel like now we're very comfortable where we are. Will asked him about diseases. He goes, I had typhoid fever, yellow fever, bubonic plague, and basically says I don't scar. A lot of I left Harry's like, now John, that's not possible, and he's like, it's not crazier than any of the other shit he's saying. What the fuck are you talking about? Like, neither is being 14,000 years old. But Will ask about his health, like I said, diseases. John admits he has 10 different degrees, but everybody's but Will's, but psychology. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I thought about it and I was like, damn, does that make me 30% of the way there? Because I've got 3. No, yeah, why does he not have wills?
Mm-hmm. Is it the later of the sciences?
It
maybe
might be.
Like, is it because some people kind of?
It might be the more contemporary sort of field. But I do like the way that he can't keep up with them. Like he can't. He's like, in all 10 of these fields, there's always these like developments that I just can't like literally keep up with.
Right.
And he's deferring to these guys, saying that they're actually all smarter than him. Book smart. Because it makes total sense. You have all these degrees, but to what end? Like at some point you're going to your knowledge base is going to reach its limit, and you can keep researching and keep updating based on technological advances and human advances, but eventually it's just going to become too much. And I thought it was interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a great he says I got my biology degree at Oxford in 1840. He's like, I'm a little behind the times. There's a great Scrubs episode with Dick Van Dyke about that, where he just becomes kind of a sloppy doctor because he can't. They're like, dude, he ends up hurting a patient, and they're like, what's wrong with you? It's like a guest spot for Dick Van Dyke, and he's like, I can't keep going to these conventions and stuff. I can't keep up with the new info. And Bob Kelso was like, well, dude, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take you off the team. Like, it's kind of sad, but he's like,
Laura's the same.
I have to go to these.
Law is the same.
Right.
Like, cases are updated every week, man. Like, there's always new.
Yeah.
There's always new precedents. That legislation's always updated. So it's like, you need to be on your toes. Like we at work, we literally have like an alert set up. Whenever like Parliament passes a new law or an update or an amendment. And we get an email saying that, hey, this amendment's happened to this piece of legislation, and we need to put it in like a register and shit. And it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
I love living 14,000 years didn't make me a genius. I just had time. Time, we can't see it, we can't measure it, we can't measure it, or we can't weigh it in a laboratory. It's a subjective sense of becoming what we are instead of what we were a nanosecond ago, becoming what we will become in another nanosecond. I love the student. I can't remember her name. She's like, no, a clock measures time. And he's like, no, a clock just measures itself. That's all it is. It doesn't really measure time. Like, because I do honestly believe in that. You ever just looked up and been like, dude, how has only 15 minutes gone by, or how has it been 2 hours? Like, I do feel like if in 100 years they're like, yeah, time dilates in weird ways, and sometimes an hour isn't quite 60 minutes. You'd be like, I believe that. Like, I totally believe that, because there's times where it's just like, man, I don't feel like, maybe it's just your subjective, like, human monkey brain sense of time. But I definitely feel like there's just moments that just fly by. I guess that's relativity, but if they told me, if somebody came out and they're like, yeah, time definitely has like some Inception and Stellar shit going on where it's dilated at times. Okay, cool. Yeah, I believe that.
I believe that too. Like I think time goes a lot faster when you're occupied, and when you're not thinking about it. Like, time is like just one of those things of like, if you're not thinking about it, it'll go faster. I don't have it. It's a tough concept.
I'm dying because I've never noticed this before. Where Will takes a look in his box, and there's like a book by John Oldman called I can't even pronounce that, the phenomenology memory, I can't remember. And then there's arts book he gives him, and the degree is like a university, and it's in anthropology at Jonathan Oldman, but it's June 14th 2001. That would have been my 11th birthday. Like, that's my birthday. And I was like, oh, that's so crazy. I can't believe that's actually in the movie. I've never noticed that before.
Nobody cares.
Yeah, most people don't. My parents didn't. No, I'm just kidding. But he Will asked about his health, blah, blah, blah. He admits he's got all these degrees. He's had a lot of time. Dan theorizes John could possibly live outside of time. Maybe time just doesn't affect him like it does us. Will kind of starts in on the tough questions. What does time mean to you? How do you feel about watching everyone you love? He's like, how do you feel knowing everyone you know will die, John? And it's like he really drives that home when we figure out why later. But he really kind of drives that point into like, how can you sit there and just still like get up every day knowing what life is going to be like for everyone around you? He kind of talks about what is a day, what is a year to you, and he says, do you ever get bored? And I love, this is the meat of the movie for me, when it's the what would you do if you met somebody who has lived for 140 centuries? What kind of questions would you ask them? And this is it. This is what I would ask them. I would say, what is a year? What is a day? What does that mean to you? And the moments that he talks about, that they, I'm tired of seeing them make the same mistakes over and over again. And he goes, well, so you see yourself as kind of different from the rest of us, don't you? He goes, well, I am, he's like, I am different. He's like, but it's not too late. We can fix this, blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like talking about the human race in like a general kind of sense. And they really get kind of, I don't know, kind of crazy, I guess, when, the moving furniture guys come and kind of take everything. We find out that Will does have a heart issue, because he tells Will, hey, you need to sit down on the couch. I think that's pretty good setup. Just that little line getting thrown in is more than enough. The whole conversation outside is just some of the best moments. I think the lighting, I think the quality of the actual, like the way the picture actually looks, but then also the performance, like between I think it's Richard, I can't pronounce his last name. He's in Office Space. Really, I think is his last name.
Oh yeah. I looked him up.
This is one of my,
I actually thought it was,
this is one of my favorite moments.
What's the diabetes guy's name again?
Wilford Brimley.
Yeah, he walked in and I was like, that the guy from The Thing?
What? I love Richard really, because he pops up in so much stuff, like Grounded for Life and Joe Dirt and Office Space. Like the dude just does not stop working. He works like a maniac. They said when they asked him to be in this movie, mind you, this is 2007, but they're like, he didn't have a cell phone. He didn't have an email. They're like, we had to like call him on a landline and fax him stuff over. And I was like, I kind of love that. And they really had to age him up. They're like, dude, he's only about 50 something in this role. They're like, but we had to really age him up to make him look older. And I was like, I think they do a good job. He's got that little scruff and he's got the gray hair. I was like, that definitely aged him up well. But he really lays it on with John once they get back. And he said, certainly you've had wives, certainly you've had children, and this is the most emotional I think you see John. He goes, I moved on. I had to. And he's like, basically, do you have any kind of like survivor's guilt from this? I love this line of questioning that he's hitting him with. And he says, do you ever think it should have been you? And once you figure out what has happened to Will, all of this starts to make a lot more sense. But he says, maybe you're a vampire, maybe you're sucking the life out of the rest of us and kind of, killing us even unconsciously, which I love that Harry at the beginning of the movie, it's like, oh, that's the prehistoric, or not prehistoric, the ancient vampire myth origin of like the guy that sucks the life out of people is John. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. But Will pulls a fucking gun on him, dude. I love this only because they've set it up earlier when he had the pipe in there. Right. Like, what did you think about this kind of turn?
I thought that this was going to be inevitable. Like in terms of like,
Really?
yeah, like just in terms of like, can you get hurt? I'll shoot you in the arm. Like, I don't know. I feel like there was going to be someone who was going to hurt him, and I thought it came earlier when, fucking what's his name tried to pull the old move on him, and he's like,
oh, Harry.
Right. But then when he pulls the gun out, I was like, okay, yes, here we are. We're here with this. Like this is in every movie. This is in every movie where there's an immortal person. It's like prove it. And
yeah. There's the person that gets jealous of like the outsider who's special now,
right? Because his wife died, right? Like she died like yesterday. Right. I wish it wasn't like yesterday. Like it could have been like a week ago or some shit. But just I don't know.
Yeah, well, because I feel like if it's too long, then everybody knows his wife has just died. But if it's too short, be like my wife died this morning. It's like maybe don't be here right now.
Right. But yeah, he's grappling with some insane things, like the gravity and the magnitude of the things that he's hearing so soon after his wife's death is obviously incredibly upsetting, right? So it's not surprising that he gets jealous and he gets resentful, and it's tough. It's a tough burden. It's a tough thing to hear.
It actually reminds me a lot of the bonus we're about to go do in a little way. That's all I'll say in case you guys haven't seen X. I don't want to ruin it, but I love what Will says. He goes, "Can you imagine how we feel? Can you imagine you told us of yourself. Like, is there anybody here who doesn't have like a touch of hatred for you? And the fact that you will live and we will die." And I love Will. He goes, "Will you come to my funeral, John?" And at the end, John, they're like, "Hey, Mr. Oldman, don't go anywhere. We might need you for questioning." He goes, "Yeah, I'll be back for the funeral." And it's like, it's like such crazy setup that he actually does go to his funeral. That all that leads up to him pulling the gun out. This is a great moment for Tony Todd too, where he's like, "I don't like what John's doing, but I sure as shit don't like what you're doing. Now give me the goddamn gun, or I'm gonna break your arm." He goes, "You sound like our football coach, Dan." I like that little
dude,
like fuck you.
Whenever Tony Todd starts yelling, love it. Like that voice,
Yes.
What was it?
Give me a goddamn arm.
in the Rock, dude, and he's like, oh, what does he say? He says something like when they try and take power from Ed Harris's character. He's like,
I can't remember.
Missiles.
Yes, dude. Yeah, the moment at the end of this, you son of a bitch, right. Like really kind of lays it out. So good.
Tony Todd's awesome, by the way.
I love. Yeah, he seems like such a sweetheart too.
Yeah.
They Will ends up putting the gun down. He goes, "I have papers to grade. As I leave you with this," and just walks off. Now, apparently, one thing I did learn from the director's commentary of this is that the show Big Love, actually, because of that show, they were able to get this location for free. That Big Love apparently filmed, like there's parts where you can see like this wall in the background of the movie, and that's actually the set of Big Love. And I was like, like that's hilarious. Like, we're able to get the spot for free, basically. Yeah. So he ends up going outside and kind of confronting Will. He gets the gun from him, sees it's not loaded, which does it shows a lot about Will's character. I think the fact that he didn't really want to hurt him, but still that's not cool, obviously. John said he's always wondered about the reasons, doesn't know exactly, why this is going on. Harry has some more comedic stuff of playing charades. We're talking about John's first wedding, and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. But it's a necessary moment of levity after what just happened, but at the same time, it's a bad joke. It's just a bad joke. But I like this. They're like, Tony Todd's like, "Call me underdeveloped, but I think I want to hear more." And I'm like, yes, like now as the viewer, I am fully invested, hook, line, and sinker. I have to know how this ends. Like there's no way that I can walk away and just not believe this, because we still have, we don't have Will, so that's one less skeptic, but we still have Art, and we still have Edith, and the room seems divided down the middle of like who believes who and what and blah blah blah. For the most part, maybe it's like a 4-2 split. But let me see here. After his departure, the group still wants more, at the exception of Art and Edith. John continues saying that he thought he met. I like this where he talks about he talks about meeting somebody like him. And he's like, basically we exchanged information. We talked for, about a week, and I couldn't really tell if he was legit or not. And we promised to keep in touch, and we didn't. And I was like, I'm sorry. Hang on. Your whole entire life, you think you've met somebody who is the only person like you, the only person you could actually spend your life with, and you don't keep up with them?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sorry. That to me is one of the biggest, like, I cannot believe that. That is unbelievable. Like, I like the fact.
Does anyone in the group bring that up or no? Because as soon as he says, yeah, we talked about it, one of them says, oh, I thought we were the first people that you actually talked to.
Yes, that's Art. He says,
right.
you told us you'd never come out to anybody before about this. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. He goes, a crack in your story, John? He's like, a touch of senility. And I was like, that's, I do like that. But he talks about, I thought I saw the guy in a train station in Brussels about 200 years later. And the fact that it's Edith, and Edith goes, oh, what a shame. And everybody looks at her. She goes, I mean, if it were true, it's a good little, it's a good
She's
little,
captivated.
Captivated. She's starting to get sucked in. They kind of talk about, John, did John just kind of happen? Why did God allow him to happen? This is where they really start kind of getting into all of the what I like to call the Jesus Christ superstar phase of the movie. They start asking him about, were you a religious historical person, basically? And he tries to call it a night. They're like, no. I love that. He's like, yeah, why don't we just wrap this up? He's like, no, fuck you, dude. Like, everybody starts, kind of going ape shit.
It's a good way to make sure that they're hooked. I mean, if this was theoretically a joke,
Right, 100%. And they take turns guessing. Was he Moses? Was he an apostle? And John says, basically the apostles weren't really the apostles. They just learned how to fish a little bit better. And they say, how do you know this? And did you see this coming? The twist of who he was and like religion.
I didn't think the movie would go this big.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
It is big, but it's very bold. But I like it. Like, I actually really do like it because maybe just for the boldness. Like this, like, how is this movie not banned? Number one,
right?
How is the Catholic Church not called for its head? Well, I guess you can just say, get away from the kids, Catholic Church. But anyway, so no, but I actually really like the fact that it's not, he didn't know Jesus, he is Jesus, and he's
right.
He's casually refuting like all the mythology that man created around Jesus. Like, for example, like, it wasn't nails. Like, they tied me down with rope. Like, like it's just all the, like, let's get all the bullshit out of the way. Like, like this, because this is what I believe. Well, this kind of like goes into what I believe is that, through the thousands of years that all of these things allegedly happened, it's been like a big game of Chinese whispers, and details have been lost through time, and people have
the game
different
of telephone.
Motivations. Right. People have different motivations, and I think I was listening to this. I'm very sorry for anyone who hasn't seen The Mandalorian, but like The Mandalorian like deals with the rise of the New Republic, right? Like basically the rebels who have overthrown the Empire, and then the New Republic gets installed in government, and immediately the New Republic starts doing what the Empire starts doing, right? And like they kind of like rewrite history. And I think I think that kind of goes into this as well, is like, people who rewrite the Bible or rewrite any religious sort of like artifact, kind of like don't do it without motivation, or don't do it without some kind of like some kind of like self idea, or like self preservation, or
everybody's got an angle.
Right, exactly. Like, if you have a flock, right, and you're wanting to lead, you're gonna want to lead them in your way, right? You're gonna want to lead them. I mean, sure you want to do it for the people and what's best for the people, but in the end, you are a human being with motives and angles, and yeah, I don't know. Like, I thought that this was the most riveting part of the movie to me, because I was just absolutely blown away by like how it really speaks to my personal mindset in terms of like religion, and how religions come about and how they survive, and kind of like how nonchalant he is. Like, he's just like he's so over it. Like, he's so over the whole like,
yes,
this is something that man created. Like,
all the
I have memories
and guffaw.
Yes,
and yes,
yeah.
he goes, the mythical overlay is so enormous, and he's like, the truth is really so simple. He goes, the New Testament in 100 words or less. You ready? And I'm like, dude, right. I am like, yes, I am 100% ready, because
I was on the edge of my seat. It was like 2 a.m. when I was watching this last night. I was like, yes, let's go.
Well, and as somebody who was raised in a strict Christian like household, like I
right.
do.
Well, you're from the South, right? So it fits.
Right. I do, I don't think anybody would say like on the base level, the things that Jesus is saying are good things, of like, hey, love your neighbor, put others before yourself, like help the poor, feed the hungry, heal the sick. Like, of course, those are all really, really great things. But I love what he says in this. It's just like, what would Jesus say, of what is going on today? He goes, basically maybe don't believe in exactly what he said, but believe in what he did and like what he talked about. Don't believe in only that small percentage of the Bible. That's the golden rule, basically.
Right.
I like that. He's like, fuck all the other shit. Fuck all the religious drama and all that. Cut it all out.
People take every word very literally and misinterpret it. I mean, that's why we have wars, right? I mean,
right.
Like, that's why
the fucking Crusades.
Right, exactly. That's why, humans kill humans. But yeah, like I really, really appreciated this. Quite a bit, actually. This felt like a very honest conversation in the movie.
Absolutely. Edith objects. She goes, Harry, will you take me home? He goes, no, I won't. I want to hear this. Like,
right. And I love the way that he breaks down the 10 Commandments. He's like, are you ready? Don't. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, yeah, fair enough.
This is some of my favorite moments from Harry. She goes, it's sacrilege. He goes, how is it sacrilege? He hasn't said anything yet. Like, there's small moments like that from Harry that really do crack me up. They say, listen, there's been a dozen New Testaments. Harry goes, hey, listen, I got fucking every shade of the rainbow at my house in terms of religion. Why don't you sit down? And they kind of, take it back to form. And we've also, I forgot to mention that John has says he's met the Buddha at one point, and that he's taken the teachings of the Buddha, molded over. Studied with him, learned some of the Eastern medicine. Talks about mulling over what the Buddha taught him for about 500 years. Decided to. Why not pass the Buddha's teaching on in a modern form? So he tried, won dissident against Rome. Rome won. The rest is history. And it's like, God, just how quickly he sums up all of Christ's life is like, Jesus Christ. He says they pinned, he's like, my last name wasn't even Christ. That's just what they pinned him with, on the crucifixion. They talk about him being dead. He says, I learned to slow my body down and basically I'm like, okay. Basically made it look like he was dead. I tried to run away. A couple of disciples saw me, tried to explain, didn't understand. And that's how everything came to be. Thus I was resurrected, and I ascended to Central Europe to get the hell away from everybody. They say, let me see your scars. I don't scar, but besides, they tie me, but blood and nails make better religious art. It's like, yeah, right. I love that. All the speculations about Jesus. He was black, Asian. He was a blue-eyed Aryan with a golden beard and hair straight out of vital sassoons. He was a benevolent alien. He never existed at all. Now he's a caveman. I like that, man. It's funny. They talk about just all the mythology behind Jesus, where the son of God, born of a virgin. Basically say it's the Hammurabi's code, even like updated, just talking about the best, parts of the Bible are just updated morality from centuries and millennia before that. And this is where things kind of like they're starting to kind of tilt in John's favor, and especially once we get Will back. Once Will comes back and he's, I'm sorry, I'm really ashamed. They bring him back in. I especially really like where the movie goes from here, because now we're an hour in. We've only got about really 15 minutes left until we hit the climax of our story. And I think that climax is one of the most nail-biting experiences I ever had watching a movie. And I ask you when, well, no, I'll wait till we get to that part. Because I want to know what you think right before we climax together. But Will says, did you ever find it prudent to worship yourself rather than be thought a heretic? He goes, yeah, there were times when Christianity was considered heresy and I had to fake other stuff. I was a shaman to eat a little bit better every once in a while. I faked some stuff. I did a little healing, to try to pass on some of the stuff I learned from the Buddha. And just, he's like, it's really so much more simple than you think. I love all this, especially with Will. Why do you think you're a caveman? Why do you think you're a psychiatrist? When did you start believing you were a psychiatrist? It's like, he's like, well, when I got a degree, motherfucker. What are you talking about? Right. He's like, do you think you're crazy, Will? He goes, no, but one day I met a caveman who thought he was Jesus. There's some really, really funny parts towards the end here. They talk about he's got an answer for everything. The man who thinks he is the man who believes he is Napoleon does believe he's Napoleon. Like, there is no argument. Like, if he's saying he's Jesus, he believes it like 100%. They think it might be drugs.
I don't think anyone will deify Kennedy.
Yeah, right. I'm like, oh, okay.
That's a great line.
They talk about it might be drugs. But Harry says no way. He's done some consulting stuff for the crime lab, and it's never really seemed. He's not seeing any of the signs of it. I like, again, Dan saying, I can just sit here and listen to John's story. I don't have to make up my mind. And they talk about how easy it would be for John to actually fabricate a backstory. That it's like, yeah, a few references, a few bullshit credentials. You just start fitting in after a while. And that's Will. Will is the one kind of starting to believe him. Art starts talking about the Kennedy assassination and how, like, look how recent that was, but how we still can't get all the facts together. And that, again, that's what I love, the game of telephone. The story goes so far back, it gets harder and harder to figure out who the fuck actually wrote it. John comes back in from loading boxes. Harry goes, hey, you fulfilled your prophecy. You've returned. Just so stupid. They put some music on. They start talking about, you've got 4 men of science completely baffled. We don't know what to make of you. They start kind of talking about, some of the musicians that were, basically ahead of even some of the scholars. He's seen species come and go. Depends on their balance with the environment. I like that he's like, you like the fire, don't you, John? He goes, yeah, everywhere I've lived, I've always had a fireplace. And I was like, I like that Will is the one to catch that as the psychologist. He's like, you go to the fire, don't you? And he's like, yeah, I like it. I've always liked it. And I was like, that's cool, man. I dig it. He talks about kind of the futility of faith, that in 1,000 years that the cows that the Hindus hold as sacred are going to be barbecued. I love all of this, where the name Jesus came from. I did a little healing with some Eastern medicine, and he just kind of puts the last little cherry on top of the, Christian Sunday as it is. And Harry says it. He goes, John, I should be home kissing my wife, but I can't, I'm so wrapped up in your story. hoping for what, a revolution? He's like, I don't know. You know, and he kind of asked him, he's like, is there anything else you have to tell us? And he goes, no. He's like, we'll quote the Sermon on the Mount. He's like, which one? He's like, there's so many different versions of it. And he basically just says, believe the best things in Jesus. You know, don't believe the teachings and the bullshit. Believe all the good stuff. Who do you think I am? He gave them a choice. I'm giving you one. I love what John says. There's a great moment too I skipped by with Edith. She's like, where were you in 1292 AD? He goes, where were you a year ago today? And it's like, damn, that's good, man. Like, he's always got an answer for everything. Well, she goes, where are you? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Do you believe that these are the first people that he's telling? I feel like his efficiency in like how he's responding to these questions just kind of like gives me a little bit of like, oh, I feel like he's been through this before.
Yeah, it does seem a little rehearsed. I don't know. Maybe I feel like, but maybe that's just the thing of like when somebody comes up and asks you questions, where were you born? Who was your brother? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you just have answers, you know, you don't have to think about it. It shouldn't come across as like a performance. That's the only thing that I kind of get from is that it seems like he's just got an answer for everything. And it's so well crafted just because it's the truth. You know, you can't argue with, oh, you were at the store on Tuesday. No, I wasn't. I wasn't home. I don't fucking have to argue this. I know where I was. You know, he's so confident in his replies to stuff. But I know what you mean. I would not surprise me at all if he were like, yeah, I tried this once in Salem and it did not end well. I had to get the fuck out of there. But let me ask you, because this is the part where Will finally puts the brakes on. He says, turn the music off. They turn the lights out and he goes, this has to stop. This must come to an end. You know, either you tell us right now that this is real or this is not, but this stops right now. Like, what did you think? Did you think he was really telling the truth or did you think he was bullshitting?
No, I thought he was telling the truth. I can't see a movie that would pull the rug out like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like, I don't know, like because everything that he's saying is actually really okay,
compelling.
Yeah, very compelling. But there was one moment where he's like pointing out like the indicators, like he's like the Van Gogh painting, the artifacts, and you said that I'm looking old. Like there was one point where I was just like, oh shit, no, you know what I mean? Like I was just like, don't think so. Like it just seems like he's really well prepared, but like also, he's recalling if this is the first time he's doing this, he's recalling this information really well. Like like he's doing this incredibly well, and I just don't buy it. I just don't buy that this was a hoax or some kind of story. It just, it was way too well put together.
God, I wish it had been like, no, it's a story. I'm just working on a story. Actually, I
would have thrown my remote through my fucking TV screen.
I think I can handle that ending only because it gives you relief in a way of that that okay, no, that wasn't true. There is no such thing as that. Like you feel the relief that the other characters would when they figure out that John's lying, so to speak, what they think. But the turn right there where he goes, okay, everybody off. And the look on everyone's faces is just like, oh my God. But the moment that I hesitated on earlier that makes me laugh is that Will goes, if you continue with this, I'll be convinced that you need a great deal of attention. He goes, I can have you committed, And as soon as he says that, you can kind of see John's face. He's like, oh, fuck. And I think that's the moment he goes, okay, time to turn this into a lie because I can't, if I go into a room with padded walls, I'm never coming out. They're going to figure out my credentials are all bullshit. I never existed. So he's like, yep, time to tell everybody it's a lie. I tried this. It's not working. Why keep pushing it? Just the reactions are so good. Tony Todd, what? He looks so hurt. Like he looks
so sad.
He goes, it was all a story, like you pointed out. You asked me about my Van Gogh, my rock. You notice I wasn't getting older. Art gave me the book on early man. Even my name Oldman, is kind of a pun. We get that great moment from Tony Todd. I feel like one of those boxes within a box within a box. I feel like I'm in the last box. But John says, "What? How could I not? I have a room full of some of the smartest people. An anthropologist, a Christian literalist, a biologist, an archaeologist, a psychologist. How could I pass that up?" Art and I think Linda, they both leave. They're like, "Okay, yeah, this is fucking crazy." It seems like Edith is like super relieved that he's not Jesus. Dan says it's just such a good idea. So rich and so full of possibilities. Will says he's not convinced. He says he might still need psychiatric help. And then we get another turn right here. He goes to take the bags out and she goes, "No, I know you're really telling the truth." He goes, "Yeah, but I thought it sounded good." And I was like, and I was like, I do kind of like that moment that it's so like, yeah, no, I just told them what they needed to hear. They weren't ready for it. It says, "Why'd you cave to Groover? It just needed to stop. I shouldn't have expected it to work." And that's sad. That's so sad to be like, you can't ever come out. It's you're living a lie. You can't come out and just tell the people that you love who you are and what you're doing, and without any fear of like retribution. It really sucks. We get Harry and Edith. They head out. After they head out, Dan leaves, and we get this final twist. What did you think of this with Will being John's son? I did not see this coming.
This surprised me. But at the same time, I was just like, damn. Like, I wonder how John is choosing the places where he moves to. And then close. And then I was just like, yeah, like maybe he's just kind of keeping an eye on his Genghis Khan like kids,
Right. Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like, what happens when somebody pops a 23andMe and they get this one dude and like 160,000 kids being born? It's like,
right.
And
what? Maybe that's why he wants to move on, because not because he's getting old and he doesn't want to be found out because he's looking old, but because he doesn't want to see his children die. Like, that's, I think,
right.
I mean, if I'm putting on my podcast hat and putting on my movie critic hat, I'm just gonna take a leap of faith and be like, I think this is why John moves on from places, because he doesn't want to get hurt. He doesn't want to get hurt over and over again watching his children die. And in this case, he decided to stick around and tell his friends the stories, and this is what happened. Yeah.
There's damn good reason for him to move, because when he doesn't, stuff like this happens. Yeah. And I like the idea of like, you could say like Will and John being brother or father and son kind of makes the world seem small. But to me, it goes, John has plowed so many chicks that the probability of him hitting one of his kids is not as bad as you would think. Like, eventually wherever he moves, he's probably got relatives and if he's been alive for 14,000 years and breeding, that dude has a relative in like every county. There's no way. Like, that guy's seed has definitely been spread. But Will says, John Tea Party in Boston. It's a great reaction from John. I remember the first time watching this and seeing John, the moment Will looks at him and goes, "Wait, Boston?" And you see John go like, "Oh my God." And he covers up his mouth. It's like, oh fuck. Because this is a guy who is,
I like this a lot. It was just rushed. It felt very
it's rushed.
Quick. I was just like, and this awkward like framing of like in the doorway. I was just like, oh, this is okay.
I like the reaction from John, because it's one of the only times he's caught off guard at all in the whole movie, is that he's like, oh shit.
Yeah, I like this a lot. Yeah.
He talks about, your mother's name was Nola. You had a dog, Wolfie. Reminds me of Terminator 2.
Yes, I was just about to say, what's wrong with Wolfie? Your foster parents are dead.
But yeah, unfortunately, Will's heart problem does get the better of him. There's some, I don't know, like he says your dog's name was Wolfie, your mother's name was Nola, and he goes, oh, you know, Chilly Willy, you know, that's you. You were always cold. And then he's like, you used to have a beard. He goes, yeah, you used to sit and tug on it. And I'm like, okay, dude, we get it. You're father and son.
Yeah.
We don't need, you guys say 5 things to the door, you know? And it's like, okay, we get it. Like the fact that you knew his mother and his pet child or his pet dog's name was enough, you know, child pet. Yeah. I that's okay. I don't need to know all these little things.
Or the fact, I mean, that he reacted, that Will reacted in this way at all to his father's, you know, and the age, you know, 60 years ago. Like, that's all I need. You don't need to give me all this, you don't need to tell me how big his dick was when he was a baby. I don't need to know this shit.
Right. You have a mole on your ass. But unfortunately, Will does pass away. Again, he says, I'll be back for the funeral. It's a great moment. I love the recall to that. And Sandy says it. She goes, you've never watched one of your children die, have you? And he says, no. Never saw a grown child die. He says, no. And I love the look on John's face. And he just turns the lights off. And, you know, you get the feeling like what you said. There is a goddamn reason I leave because I don't want to have to experience this. And the fact that John is experiencing something like this for the first time is palpable. You know, I like the fact that he just gets straight into the truck and he's like, yep, I've got to move because what else am I to do? Am I just going to sit here and stew on this? It's like, I've got plenty of time to do that when I'm setting up my next life. Also, so I guess, you know, John goes to leave and he parks the truck and he looks over at Sandy and she gets in the truck. Who else is going to drive her out of here? Like the only car left is Will's.
Leaves it.
Yeah. I was like, who else is going to, because Harry says something. He goes, hey, are you riding with me? And she goes, like, almost as like, hey, you ready to go? Like, you're riding with me. And she goes, no, I'm just going to stay here. And I was like, yeah, of course, you're her only ride. Like, don't fucking leave her, dude. But that's it, man. That's Man from Earth.
This ending was incredibly depressing. Not only from the Will thing, but also Sandy looking at the car and being, you know, making her decision to join him, knowing that, you know, she's going to die before him. Like, you know, like it's just like, and it's a matter of time. Like, you know, it's this was good. It's a realistic ending, but it was very like solemn, I thought.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the only note to appropriately end on when it's like, yeah, this is one chapter in the day of the life of a 14,000-year-old guy. And it's like, now imagine this happening to you dozens, hundreds, thousands of times throughout your whole life. You know, it's a miracle John isn't just like murdering people. But that's Man from Earth, dude. That's it. I'll read off these 2 comments that we got. So I posted something again in the after party, just kind of telling people where they could find this movie. And, you know, the fact that it was free and not a lot of people have seen it. And I actually got a few comments and a few likes. My friend Vivian, she says, I think this is the movie I've been trying to remember the name of for years. And
nice. That's such a good feeling.
I love being the dental floss that helps somebody get that thing out of their teeth. And they're like, that's what that is. It's like, yes. I was really excited about that. And then Jeremy Derry says he actually loves this movie. He's like one of the only people I know that's seen it, besides the group I saw it with. So I was pretty happy about that. The fact that even 2 people commented was like, that's a success for me.
So we've got like, 2 downloads. I'm very happy, man. I'm so happy with that.
But, you know, my final thoughts, I love this movie. I think it's great. I would love to see maybe a bigger budget remake someday, if not a remaster, you know, give it to me in 4K. I would love to see an updated version of it. I think that
I'm trying to think of a filmmaker who could pull this off. This feels like an Aronofsky film.
Yeah, I feel like Aronofsky's gonna, I don't know, not just like make it weird, but it would be a lot darker of a movie, you know?
I thought The Whale was really like this. yeah, a lot of the whale transfers over into this, I think.
Oh,
But yeah, and that movie's not that dark. I mean, like, yeah, there are dark moments in it, like him going absolutely ape shit on some KFC, but like overall,
hmm
that movie's very hopeful. But this movie's not that hopeful, so I don't know.
right.
It wouldn't be your Tarantinos, it wouldn't be your Nolans, your Scorseses, maybe like
Your
Noah
Villeneuve.
Baumbach or yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you would have to take somebody who has done really good stage directing as well. Like you need somebody who's got a foot in both worlds. And I don't know. I want to say, is it Mike Nichols who did the Birdcage? Because
Yeah.
that is a very similar kind of only takes place in a few locations, mainly kind of thing. I think Mike Nichols would be maybe not the right sensibilities, but just somebody off the top of my head that would have a good. He did The Graduate, I think. Actually, I better fact check that, but somebody who's kind of got a foot in both of those worlds would be a good idea.
Hmm.
Um, or I think this would be great if Amazon or YouTube or someone said, "Hey, we're gonna make an hour and a half long remake of this, updated with a new cast and stuff." And because when this was made in 2007, these kind of movies were not it was B movie schlock, that came on the Sci-Fi Channel. And now I feel like these kind of things can get a second life and maybe get a bigger production on something like Netflix or Amazon or something like that.
I tell you who could pull this off, actually, and it's such a cliched answer, but Spielberg. I mean, Spielberg,
Sure.
like in between his sort of like big budget, more family friendly ones, like he sometimes makes these really heady films like the Post and Bridge of Spies, and yeah, I don't know, like he's so good with science fiction, and I think if he got brought back down to earth a little bit from the Fablemans and West Side Story, he could fucking nail this, man. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to a credit to Jerome Bixby, who wrote this. This is the last thing I think he ever wrote. He was a science fiction writer, mainly a short story writer. And I
Twilight
think he
Zone,
wrote for
right?
some. I think so. I know he wrote for like Star Trek and stuff, but I'm not 100% sure on his entire on his entire catalog. But that it's not called like Richard Shankman's Man. It's called Jerome Bixby's Man from Earth. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Oh, so
That
hold
they
on.
actually
His best known television works include 4 original Star Trek episodes called 1967's Mirror Mirror, 1969's Requiem for Methuselah, Day of the Dove, and By Any Other Name. And then his short story, It's a Good Life, was adapted as a teleplay for the Twilight Zone by Rod Serling. So there you go.
Nice. Isaac Asimov described Bixby as an excellent piano player. So
Yeah.
I guess he knew some
Nice.
people. Final
3
thoughts.
Rules
What
of
do you say?
Robotics. I liked it. I liked it a lot. Would I put it in my 5 top movies? No. Here's my thing. I think this movie's concepts and ideas have been done in other movies, probably not as good. And now, of course, that I try to think of him, I can't think of anything. But like,
Yeah, he's like a prehistoric Forrest Gump. Like he
right,
just falls ass backwards into a lot of this stuff.
right. But more than that, like the vampire elements of it, like like
Mm,
this was dealt with in, especially Interview with a Vampire.
let
Like
the
that,
right one in. Yeah.
right? Yeah, let the right one in. Like this whole idea of like immortality and whether it's worth it, and whether you were a religious figure, or a famous figure from history. But I really like the way it's written. The religious conversations in this were were absolutely riveting. Um, I think the acting is kind of dog shit from everyone except from the lead, John. um, but that I don't know. It might have just been the way it was directed. Might have been the way it was filmed. It just didn't feel. It felt very hallmarky a little bit, like
Mm.
a little bit of like a TV
I
movie
think it's
kind of
definitely
stuff.
got those moments for sure.
Right.
Everybody's got a moment where they kind of strike out.
Yeah. But it was good. It was good. It's a good movie. It's definitely worth watching for sure.
Nice. I will say there is a second one. It's called Man from Earth, Holocene, or I can't. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
I tried to. Yeah.
Yeah, I have only watched like half of it. I bought it on Blu-ray, and I remember watching it and being like, "Man, once I watch this, I'm never gonna get to watch it again." So I put it off forever, and I've never, because I'm like, man, that way I always know there's a Man from Earth out there for me to like watch and finish. I do know that the hook of the story is that it's been 10 years since John moved on, and now he's starting to age. And it's like, oh, okay. That's the only way that the story gets any more interesting is if you're like, now he's starting to age. And you're like, oh, cool, man. Like that's kind of interesting. Like, why is it he's starting to age now versus is it because he let a secret out because he told everybody? Like, I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting.
And one of them wrote a book about him, right? In the movie, in the sequel.
Yeah, Art. So Art ends up kind of going nuts. Not going nuts, but he gets laughed out of like academia for publishing a book about John, and he basically becomes like a believer. And I think he kind of figures out John's whole story of John Oldman was like bullshit. He never existed. That he figures out that was all a lie. And I think that's kind of the thing that like, if I'm Art, the second I get back to that college, I go, hey, find some way to pull up John's records and then start kind of just tracing everything back. And when you realize the guy's whole backstory is a lie, I would shit my pants, dude. I feel like, oh my God, he was telling the truth. But yeah, again, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it is really, as much as I adore this movie, I feel like it's like one of your kids. It's like, there's things about him you love, there's things about him you don't like, but there's things that as it gets older, I appreciate it and find different things about it. And I will forever, hold this movie in a really high regard because it was one of the first movies as a teenager that really pushed my brain to go, okay, what is a Cro-Magnon? What is this era? What is this? What is that?
Definitely does introduce you to concepts if you do watch it at the right age, right? Like different wild science fiction concepts, but also anthropological concepts for sure.
Right. And not everything is just about sci-fi and I met this guy and I met that guy. They talk about geography and everything, and it's a great story, and I do think that it 100% needs an update. It needs a facelift, or it needs to be outright like remade. And it'd be awesome to see David Lee Smith come back and play Will this time, or play Art, or play somebody else, but instead of playing John Oldman, give some kind of cameo or something like that. But the actors who are in this, I've seen interviews with them. They're like, how often do people stop you and talk about Man from Earth? They're like, all the time. Like, I have people all the time come out and talk to me about this. And I think especially back in the day, maybe not so much now, but this was a very, like, for how small this movie was, it was hot. It was really hot when it came out. To the fact that you have to think, if I heard about it in Podunk fucking Tennessee in the mid to late 2000s, that it probably had some kind of staying power. But enough to the point that here we are talking about it 15 years later. And it got a sequel, and apparently they've done a Kickstarter campaign to make Man from Earth this series, but I don't know if that ever materialized at all.
I read that it didn't make its the goal.
See, I read that one, it didn't make its goal, and then they did a second one, and then it made its goal. But that was in like 2014 or something. So I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But I if this is the last of the IP, then that's okay. It doesn't need to be run into the ground. But I think that at some point, this is definitely worthy of the reboot retreatment. And I hope somebody, picks up the rock and finds this thing underneath it. But guys, if you stuck all the way to the end of this, I greatly appreciate it. This episode's for me. I've been waiting to do this episode forever. If this movie is not for everybody, I totally understand that. Go fuck yourself. No, I'm just kidding. If you, I get it. It's not, when you go in and you watch it, the first time I was told about it, I was expecting flashbacks. I was expecting, it to cut back to him. But if the story does that, then the hinge on whether he's telling the truth or not doesn't matter, because you're seeing it. You can't trust him as a storyteller. You're being shown it, like literally. So you're just going to buy it. So in a way, I'm glad they didn't do that. But if you enjoyed it, which I hope you did, stop by, rate, review us on iTunes. Let us know how we're doing. Again, the second one is also free on YouTube if you guys want to check it out. Man from Earth Holocene, Holocene, I think is how you say it. I've, very fortunate to be able to do this. I've waited a long time to pull the trigger on it, just because it is such a very niche kind of movie. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I was fully expecting way more criticism than I got, which is surprising. I think you're being
not a
polite.
Dick.
No, I'm just no, but I also know you wouldn't pull any punches. I was like, no, if he didn't like this, he'd probably straight up be like, yeah, I know you like it, but fuck you. This is terrible. But I think that it's important to be objective, even though how much I love this movie and how much nostalgia I have for it, to be like, yeah, everybody kind of strikes out at certain points, but then everybody has multiple home runs in their performances and the reactions to stuff. And I'm really glad we covered it. I'm really a little sad that it's out of the way, but hey, there's always the sequel. No, I'm just kidding. Because the sequel actually leaves more than like, it's very different from this apparently. And I don't think it's as highly regarded, but it's definitely very different from this one. So I don't know, maybe someday, maybe who knows. But guys, again, thanks for sticking all the way to the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. The socials are in the show notes if you want to find anything. Remember, stop by patreon.com/midnight double feature. We're going to be doing X on the next episode, and we will see you guys over there. Bye.